The first part of this presentation deals with the most important stages of preliminary research in mimetic retouching, while the second part explores the applicability of the research results in 3 case studies. Is it possible to mimic artist intention? Well, it is hard to argue if a conservator can actually see the painting from the point of view of the artist who made it and comprehend the psychological and social context. But, on the other hand, it is quite possible to discuss conservators' ability to perceive the artwork from a physical aspect by exploring the present materials from which it was made and the methods of construction. It is also possible to objectively determine the artist's craft in the use of perspective, anatomic precision in figural representation, and intensity of the chiaroscuro. Well-informed understanding of the old master painting techniques in conservation practice was firstly introduced by Helmut Röhmann. The art of retouching practiced under his guidance was based on the observation of the original methods of the painter and faithful reconstruction of the layering structure of the original. The aim of our presentation is to point out the relevance of preliminary research that can help to formulate this kind of approach in retouching, where the complete strategy is developed before the physical contact with the surface of the painting occurs. According to our study, there are 4 stages of preliminary research that should affect conservators' decision in mimetic retouching. These are historical information, analysis of the paint layer in the visible spectrum, technical studies, and study of the elements of form. The results gained by these investigations can serve as complementary material in understanding original methods and techniques of the painting construction, or, in other words, the artist's intention, which is essential for defining precise strategy in retouching. When dealing with damages on religious old master paintings, the iconographic study of presented symbols, attributes, or emblems can lead to precise identification of the Christian saint. Moreover, archive evidence of the former state of the painting, as well as study of the related works, can help to understand the continuity and the progress of the damaged painting. This implies drawings, cardboard, sketches on the subject by the master, or copies and variants of the work. Studying contemporary historical sources and literature on colorimetry can help to understand how a particular hue is achieved. In visual and microscopic examination, the artist's original technique and the superposition of the paint layer are observed and elaborated. Sometimes the original color can be matched by a single stroke of retouching paint, but the illusion of depth and luminosity require more accurate reconstruction of the old master technique. In order to obtain these qualities, it is necessary to follow the genuine technical approach of the artist in retouching. Basic old masters techniques are wet on wet, impasto, glazing, and scumbling. The observations under the raking light can reveal further details such as the manner and direction of the stroke and the viscosity of the paint. A great deal about the artist's intention can be comprehended by such examination. For example, the use of heavy textured impasto can indicate the painter's intent to suggest the movement in a certain area of the painting, as in the painting of Van Gogh on the right. Cross-section of the painted layer examined with optical microscopy can provide insight into the pigment structure, arrangement, thickness and texture of each layer in the painting. It can also indicate the painter's technique and rapidity of his paint application by observing the sharpness of the borders between each layer. Following the genuine layering structure and the painting technique detected by this kind of studies can lead to more accurate color matching results. SEM-EDS analysis gives further information about the layers observed by optical microscope. BSE cross-section images and EDS element maps provide information on distribution of different elements in the cross-section. EDS spectra detects and measures the concentration of elements in the particular spot. This data can help to understand the nature of the painting materials and indicate possible alteration in their structure. Thus, conservator can set a retouching goal that seeks to provide a balance between artist's intent and deterioration of the present materials. In addition, collected data from the cross-section analysis should be backed up with results of multispectral imaging. When dealing with complex loss on a figural painting that needs to be reconstructed, infrared image can help to understand the basics of the composition and reveal the original drawing method. Most of the painting materials are more or less transparent to X-rays. However, pigments containing heavy metals, such as lead white, lead tin yellow, vermilion, all absorb X-rays. These materials were very common in underpainting mixtures. Hence, the X-ray image can indicate how the painter has constructed the tonal values in underpainting. This information can be applied in retouching as well. The optical elements of form, such as line, shape, color, light and dark, mass, volume, texture, and space, may be corrupted by the loss in the painting. In order to restore them correctly, conservator has to understand the principles of anatomy, perspective, and chiaroscuro. This kind of study is especially relevant when dealing with complex losses in figural paintings. There are three anatomical systems relevant for conservator. These are skeleton, musculature, and skin. Furthermore, there are two types of linear perspective that the conservator has to recognize in the damaged painting, 1-point and 2-point. The knowledge of the body form will improve conservator's eye for form and detail, while delineation of the original perspective within the painting can lead to precise location of the missing elements of form. Apart from the direction, hue, and strength of the light source in the painting, the intensity of the chiaroscuro depends on perspective type and anatomical features of the figure, such as underlying fat, epidermis smoothness, superficial muscles, and bone protrusions. The painting depicting Christ's baptism and Our Lady of Mount Carmel was painted by Francesco Fredricazzi from Veneto around 1711. Due to unusually vivid and light colors uncommon for the Baroque period, it was difficult to determine its date of creation. Although badly damaged, the painting has retained the luster of intact oil paint and freshness of colors. Therefore, the main guideline of the retouching was to respect and keep the preserved authenticity of the paint. Hence, various analytical methods were used to examine it. The composition of the blue pigment from Our Lady's mantle could not be determined using EDX spectrometry, indicating an organic colorant. Considering the 17th and 18th century painting manuals, indigo is the most probable option. EDS confirmed the presence of rock alum, lead white, and chalk, historically employed for improving the permanence of drying properties of indigo. This has certainly contributed to the excellent preservation of Fredricazzi blue color up to date. The red robe of St. John the Baptist was painted using red lead coated with a thin translucent pinkish glaze with no particles observed in it, indicating a lake pigment. EDS analysis confirmed the assumption, pointing out common substrate of this pigment, rock alum and chalk. It was evident that Fredricazzi's palette consisted of pigments common for the Baroque period, lead white, massicot, probably indigo, red lead in combination with red lake, and natural earth pigments such as sienna, amber, and green earth. Technical peculiarity of the painting was the layering structure of the landscape area behind the scene of baptism. The final layer is composed of green earth pigment, commonly regarded as a pigment with low intensity. However, the landscape appears surprisingly intense. The X-ray image has evident higher degree of X-ray absorption in the lower area of the painting, while the cross-section revealed an intermediate layer of lead white. This layering structure has explained the unusual situation of the green earth pigment that was apparently intended by the artist. Thus, when it comes to mimetic retouching, the white underpaint is particularly important to produce a precise color match. The painting shows no traces of original varnish, nor from later interventions. It has retained the luster of genuine oil paint. Varnishing would result in overall deeper tonalities and compromise the artist's intent. For example, the darkening of green earth pigment occurs only when oil or varnish penetrates the particles. This was the case with Fredricazzi's painting from the island Chiovo on the right, which is significantly darkened due to the varnish from a historical treatment. This preliminary research was significant for deciding which materials and techniques to apply in retouching and in final related phases of the conservation treatment. In order not to compromise the genuine appearance of the intact oil paint, retouching was done using wash colors only, in respect to the original artist's intent, and in order to preserve the brightness of the green earth, the painting was left unvarnished. Varnishing would not only change the green color, but would modify the refractive indices of all the colors, resulting in overall deeper tonalities, compromising the artist's intent. The aim of the retouching project carried out for the painting Our Lady of Carmel by Italian Baroque painter Antonio Grappinelli was to bring back the quality of the colors that was considerably corrupted in earlier unskillful treatment. The luminosity of the original paint layer, which was the main feature of the artist's style, has been greatly obscured by darkened layers of overpaints that degraded the value of the artwork. A large portion of the surface was overpainted with glazes following the original forms and tonality of the painting, as an attempt to hide the damage done to the paint layer during the cleaning. The general impression of this treatment is that it was executed carelessly and with no respect to the artist's intention. After the complex removal of the vast overpaints, the preliminary research has taken place. In visual and microscopic examination of the paint layer, the luminosity of colors was observed in close detail. The texture of the red and blue colors, especially on the garment of the Virgin Mary, was very soft and glossy. The main question was how to achieve this luminosity in retouching. The observations under the raking light revealed further details. They provided more specific insight into characteristic texture and viscosity of the surface. As suspected, the texture of the canvas predominates on majority of the composition, while the gentle brush marks are present exclusively where the master has painted the clothes of the characters with dense paint. The soft impasto was perceived on the borders of the drapery and belts of the saints. Arrangement of the painted layers was observed on several locations, among which the skin tone, the white robe of baby Jesus, and the red robe of Archangel Michael. The stratigraphy gave insight into a very thin paint application on the skin tones in comparison with the much thicker paint deposit on the areas of white drapery. The cross-section from the skin tone and white drapery revealed that the painter has applied thin grey underpainting over the brown ground. Most probably his intention was to minimize the warm effect coming from the ground layer. On the other hand, the absence of that grey underpaint on the red drapery explains the high saturation in that area. Preliminary research showed that the methodical paint application in terms of interlayering and selective thickness of the paint coatings was the reason of such charming luminosity of the colors. It was evident that in order to preserve the intensity of colors, the retouching had to be built in the same manner, and that the paint has to be imitative not only in color, but in the texture as well. This approach has greatly facilitated the color match, possibly because the painter has achieved his color variations in a similar way. In order not to lower the quality of the painting and its antique luminosity, most of the minutest damages of the paint layer were deliberately left in unfinished stage, with the original color ground. Only the selected lacunas were treated. The soft impasto built in underpainting has been reconstructed exclusively on the borders of the drapery. Accordingly, the artist's intention that was lost in the previous intervention was respected and hopefully restored with as much accuracy as possible. The crucial part of preliminary research carried out for the complex intervention of retouching on the painting Virgin Mary and Child with St. Lawrence and St. Nicholas from the 7th century was the study of the elements of form. The damage contained the loss of a body part located in the upper area of the composition within the group of lying chubby angels. Besides the lower line of the left foot, partially visible on the preserved remains of the paint layer, angels' legs were completely lost. Due to liturgical importance of the painting in the church of St. Lawrence in Šibenik, the reconstruction of the damaged composition was rather desirable. Besides the lower line of the left foot, partially visible on the preserved remains of the paint layer, Angel's legs were completely lost. Although the use of linear perspective was rather vogue in too many spots, the vanishing point was detected and the imaginary line of the lower part of the missing foot was easily located. However, the form of the foot was still questionable, and thus it was necessary to perform anatomical research coupled with the use of live model as a helping tool. Observations of the preserved angels have shown that the angularity of bones is suppressed. Instead, the painter has emphasized the interior mass of the limbs. 2-year-old baby was placed in the same position as the damaged figure, and his legs were photographically documented. The anatomical drawing was made and tested within the composition. Finally, the study of the original chiaroscuro in the painting has evident that the old master used one source lighting to define the form that came from the upper left. Areas of highlight, light, shadow, core shadow, reflected light, secondary highlight, and cast shadow were distributed according to the direction, hue, and strength of the primary light source. The intensity of the chiaroscuro on the missing limbs was affected by the original perspective and anatomical features of the figure. A detailed examination of the paint surface through a binocular microscope gave insight into painter's technique. The brushstrokes showed that the angels were painted on the top of the blue sky area. Furthermore, the use of wet-on-wet technique was detected on the surface of the skin tones. Thus, the retouching was performed in the same layering structure and method of application. Chiaroscuro was almost entirely obtained in the underpainting stage. However, the antique appearance was accomplished in final glazing. The retouching of the missing foot was executed with an idea to restore the unity of the form, but also to leave the fine details of the foot undefined and suggestive. The main question of this complex retouching is, are there any disturbing effects with the re-established composition? With respect to the painter's technique, the elimination of that unpleasant effect was the main goal of the intervention. If the final appearance of the painting does not evoke the doubt of the composition as a whole, then the application of the research results was rather successful. This study shows that there are 4 major investigations that should affect conservators' decision in mimetic retouching. These are historical information, examination of the paint layer in the visible spectrum, technical studies, and study of the elements and principles of artistic composition. The analysis of the paint layer permits to identify the order in which each layer was applied and which materials were used. If the conservator respects the genuine artist method of interlayering structure of the paint layer, the matching retouching process can be much easier to accomplish. Moreover, study of the elements of form can help to understand how will the missing part appear in a certain posture and how the primary light source in the painting affects the chiaroscuro. It is therefore concluded that the technical and historical information can be used as a leading tool to form the retouching strategy that aims to respect and recover the artist's intention with as much accuracy as possible.